So artificial intelligence is one of those buzzwords out in the industry today. And so I thought I'd look maybe back at one of the previous buzzwords that we probably all know so well, big data. So I love this quote. Big data is like teenage sex. Everybody talks about it. Nobody really knows how to do it. Everyone thinks everybody else is doing it, so everybody claims they're doing it. So for today's talk, let's just talk about that as AI. So let's actually look at what's already happening in conversation AI today. We have several platforms around the world. Messaging is taking over. You have multiple platforms with 1 billion users. Messaging is the primary app that we see in the App Store and all the various download charts. Even chatbots are already becoming status quo. We're here in Amsterdam, so I figured I'd highlight KLM as well as the Skyscanner bot. But these are really just becoming table stakes of where we are. We actually have consumers today who are increasing their expectations. They're expecting to be able to talk to their devices. We have things like Alexa, like Google Assistant, Google Home, things that we can just talk to. We want to be able to say things like, Alexa, just turn on the patio. And it should just know that means turn on the lights, turn off the lights. It figures out all the different outlets, all the different cycles. It should just know what we mean, know what we want. So let's look at travel. We have various bots, and you might say, Alexa, find me a flight from London to Amsterdam, heading out on Tuesday and coming back on Friday. You know, basically the flight you'd book to come here. Well, let's look at how that actually plays out. What actually happens in bots is it's still looking for those keywords that fill in all of the same fields, the same 5 fields about how we've been searching for a flight for decades and decades, right? It's still a mapping. It's still speaking in the language that we expect it to. We're just filling out a form with voice. So we talk about what comes next. And what we really are looking for is an assistant, a digital assistant that just knows us. And there was a shout out this morning to the science fiction author, William Gibson. And I love this quote. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. So let's look at a couple other things. When you want these conversations, you just want to speak the way that you would speak to your friends. You want to say things like, hey, book a table at that neighborhood place for date night. And it should just know date night is, I do it on Fridays, it's with my wife, this is how I avoid getting divorced. And it should just know the neighborhood place is the place around the corner, it's that little Italian restaurant we like. And so there was a demo shown just last week from Google that I thought I'd highlight just really briefly and play a couple seconds for you. So what you'll hear going on here is, this is a phone call.
Hello?
And what you hear is somebody calling a restaurant to make a reservation.
I'd like to reserve a table for Friday the 3rd.
You can notice in some of the text coming on the screen, you'll see some of the small idioms we use as humans. Okay. You know, all those small motions.
Hold on one
What's
second.
really fascinating about this, and I encourage you to watch the full video, is the customer voice is AI.
For 2 people.
That is somebody who told their Google Assistant to just book a restaurant reservation for me under Daniel.
At 5.
But this ability to use AI on voice, it's not just for humans. It's not just for consumers. You have companies like Cogito, who what they're doing is they're working for customer service firms, and they're scanning the voice used by customer service agents on the phone, determining when have they started to become fatigued, when is their empathy going to go down, when are they actually going to hurt the consumer experience for every one customer, right? They're monitoring the voice, monitoring the pace of speech, and being able to flag when somebody is losing empathy and might need to take a break. How does this start to change the way that we measure our customer service experience? And so as AI continues to evolve and continues to change voice, there are all kinds of innovations happening in ways that make this more natural and more accessible. So how does this voice piece come into travel, and where are we going? These are the types of things you actually want to ask your digital assistant. Can you just move my flight to tomorrow at 8:30? It should just know. It should know what flight, it should know what time, know what airline, know which ones. It's actually not an 8:30 flight, it's an 8:35 flight. It should just figure this stuff out. I just need to be in London next week, Monday through Thursday. Right? These types of things, it should know what's the hotel I normally stay at, what are the flights I normally take, because I go there every couple of weeks, so on and so forth. And the truth is, the flight and the hotel part are the easy part. Put easy in quotes, but they're relatively understandable. They're relatively repeatable patterns. You fly the similar airlines, you tend to stay at the same hotel that's by the office. Here's the stuff that actually gets really hard. The types of things that if you had a personal assistant who knew you for years, these are the types of things they'd be able to do for you. They know, depending on the aircraft, you pick different seats. Oh, by the way, don't forget to put in my American Airlines number so that I get the exit seat for free. Or even complicated scenarios, if you're flying out of an EU country, like me, and have a US passport, there are certain airlines that make you check in the manual counter, so make sure you pay for the premium fare so that you don't have to wait in a 3-hour line leaving Barcelona in July and miss your flight, as I did once. So when we talk about this notion of deep personalization, it's really, yesterday it was a nice to have, it surprised and delighted consumers. But the reality is, travel aside, consumers are already experiencing this today. Nobody opens their Netflix and expects it to look exactly like their neighbors or their friends. Nobody logs onto Facebook and expects it to look exactly like every other user on the planet. Consumers today expect deep personalization. They don't even reward you for it. They just expect it. It's just table stakes. And when you look to tomorrow, without deep personalization, consumers will find someone else who will. And some of this might be obvious. These are common trends. These are things that are known, but disruption comes from where you're not looking. So let's talk about the camera. And what happens with the camera? We think quite a lot about digital, and we think about text and voice is a replacement for text, but what starts to happen in the camera? Here's a couple common consumer examples. On the left, you see the Amazon app. You can take a picture of something, it'll find it to buy. On the right, this is a demo from Pinterest where you can take a picture of strawberries, and it starts to find different recipes you can make with those strawberries. From my friend Oliver and his team at Kiwi, this is something they put out a couple of months ago. Using your camera to size up your luggage and see, will it fit on the carry-on? Will you be able to take this on, or do you need to buy a bag? But when you start to think about this evolving, if that box is red instead of green, why doesn't it just pop up, say, hey, just tap here, thumbprint, Apple Pay, $50, you bought a bag, and just add it to my reservation? It just needs to know, it needs to have this context. Other things, we talk a lot about online to offline in this world. People are purchasing travel online to experience something offline. What about the inverse? If I see a picture, I see a magazine, I read one of those flight back magazines, how do I take a picture of that and have that instantly generate an itinerary for me? Because that's where I want to go. You can even start looking at cameras as ways to reduce fraud. And in a low margin industry like some of us are in, fraud is a massive cost. And so here's a company, Ping On in China, that's having people record their 5 or 6 statements for insurance by video, and they're able to assess whether the person is lying or not. And that starts to reduce fraud. So this notion of conversation, voice, camera, AI, all of these trends are coming, but they are actually here, they are actually real. And to be honest, if you haven't started yet, you are behind. So I thought, instead of just telling everybody they're behind, maybe we just offer a couple of tips of things you can get going on. So first, I want to tell just a really quick story. So I have a friend of mine, I hired him when he was 22, right out of school, and we've all worked with those kids as graduates where you just look at them and you just kind of want to shake your head in disgust because they're so much smarter at 22 than you will ever aspire to be in your whole life. So he's worked at Microsoft and Facebook and Snapchat and a couple other companies, building data and machine learning and AI stuff for them. And this is his #1 piece of advice, is to un-F your data. Some places are in a great place. You might think a place like a Facebook or a Google has really great quality data. They still have this problem. And it gets messed up, it gets screwed up on a daily basis, weekly basis, and you have to be vigilant about this. Other places, data is not so clean, and maybe this is a more accurate description of the current state. Second, this stuff is really hard. Really, really hard. And if you want your team to be pushing in this direction, you've got to help them dream. What is that great story? Not that incremental improvement, but that massive, big, hairy, audacious goal that you can help your team aspire to. How do you create that story and motivate them about what can be possible, what can be achieved? You've got to start today. If you are behind, if you're not picking up on this stuff, you've got to start today. This stuff takes a long time. And the last is to be patient. When we look at technology projects, we've all been coached to think in agile ways and iterative ways. Do a little bit of work, get a little bit of value. A little bit of work, a little bit of value. The problem with data is that we're far less forgiving. Nobody would feel comfortable if their P&L statement was plus or minus 20% every quarter when they report it. Right? Nobody likes their checking account to be hit or miss, 10, 15%. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. We expect precision, we demand precision from data, and AI does the same. And that means it takes a really long time to invest your first work to get enough time to have value that you can trust. And then you can get into this iterative space. So with that, un-F your data, create an inspiring story, get started today, and really be patient with your team. With that, I'll wrap it up. Maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryan.